Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are doing a deck tech for my paper 5-color elemental Horde of Notions Elemental Tribal. About 2 years ago I did a deck tech for him. Horde is probably one of my favorite decks. I've had him for so many years and he's so near and dear to me and I love this. I love the 5-color elementals. I think they're so fun, they're so janky. Horde is a 5-mana 5/5 with Vigilance, Trample, Haste. Then you can pay one of each. You may play target elemental card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. So we can do that at instant speed to reanimate our elementals when we want to. I have the deck in no particular order, but going in, I have 9 basics, 2 mountains, 2 plains, 2 islands, 2 forests, and a single swamp, just because the deck is not that black heavy, and we also have the triumphs and the other 2-color lands and the other stuff to be able to not have to worry about that. So we're fine on mana. I believe there's like 36 lands or so and a decent amount of ramp. The deck is in no order. Let's go into it. Omnath, Locus of the Royal. 4 mana 3/3. He enters the battlefield. It deals damage to any target equal to the number of elementals you control. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you put a 1/1 counter on an elemental you control. And if you have 8 or more lands, draw a card. Omnath is super cool because at the very worst, he just counts himself as an elemental. So it's at worst always 1 damage. And then as the game progresses, he starts to get bigger and bigger. And then you just start drawing cards. So he's real good. And then you reanimate him later and then deal more damage. Whoa, that's so many spoilers. Should probably put like half the deck down. Tyrant to Discord. I love this card. 7 mana 7/7. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent chooses a permanent type he or she controls at random and sacrifices it. If a non-land permanent is sacrificed, repeat the process. An opponent counts up all their permanents. They pick one at random. Usually we do it through a dice roll is how I do it. And then they sacrifice it. If it was a land, stop. If it wasn't a land, keep going until they hit a land. The cool thing about this deck, and you'll notice that most elementals have an enter the battlefield ability. I have a decent blink sub-theme and just like enter the battlefield stuff. So this is usually like double triggered, or even if it just happens once, that's fine. It dies, we reanimate it at instant speed, we do it again. It's good. Mold Drifter enters the battlefield for 5 mana, draws 2 cards, or we can kill it right away, draw 2 cards. Mold Drifter is good. If we have a blink engine, it's great. If we have a Panharmonicon, which we'll see later, it's great. It's just good. Drawing even just 2 cards for 3 mana, that's basically divination. That's just a sorcery. And sometimes it's a body that sticks around. Herald's Horn, elementals cost 1 less. Then we look at the top card of our deck, and if it's an elemental, put it in our hand. If not, it's fine. So the big thing is elementals cost a lot of mana. Like Mold Drifter cost 5, Omnath cost 4, Tyrant to Discords cost 7. Elementals cost a lot. So we need cost reduction, and it's also just good card advantage, so it's not even that bad. Morophon the Boundless, that's an elemental. 7 mana 6/6, elemental, say elemental, elementals cost Wooburg less, and then other elementals get +1/+1. Here's the cool thing about it, is if we don't play Horde yet, we just play Horde for free. Literally just cost every color less, so we just play them for free. If there's any commander attacks, we do that. I will mention in this deck, though, the goal isn't to play Horde. The deck does not need Horde to function. Horde is just a value piece in the command zone. He is a pretty decent clock because he's a 5/5 with Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, so he's a great blocker. He's a great attacker. But he's just good for reanimation. You got 5 mana open up. Not much else to do. Quick reanimation. Morophon is really just there as a lord and a big cost reducer because our elementals are oddly costed. Like you can even see Omnath is 3 pips. So he helps trim the fat. He's good big boy, lord, and a cost reducer. Torrent Elemental is super slept on. When it attacks, tap down all creatures defending player controls. You can't really, honestly, here's a cool thing about Torrent Elemental. You can't really even get rid of it, right? When it attacks, if you kill it, we reanimate it with Horde. If you exile it, we just return it. The way this card is really good, though, is it just kills people because it says when you attack, target player can't block. So all their creatures are tapped down. Great. Sunbird's Invocation. We have a lot of big cards. So having all of our stuff be 2 for 1 is pretty good. And that's kind of the idea of it. So we cast like a 5. We look at the top 5. Play 1. We give all our big spells a 2 for 1. Endurance. 3/4. Flash. Reach. This is really our way just to stop reanimation stuff. If someone's like milling us out, we can help ourselves. If someone's playing a grave deck or they do a reanimation target, we can even just cast it for free by getting rid of a green card. It's good. Xander's Lounge is just a Triumph. I run all of the Triumphs, so I'm not going to say it for every single one. But all of the Triumphs have all the types. They enter tapped, and you can cycle it for later. Since it's a 5-color deck, we do need that kind of good, efficient fixing. So the fact is, early game, we play it tapped. Mid game, it sucks that we're playing it tapped, but late game, it's always just pay 3 and discard it to redraw. Because we're also, we get a lot of mana in this deck. Spar's Headquarters, same exact thing. The only difference I will say is that this is fetchable because I do run, I believe, 3 Visits and Farseek. Maybe one of them. I don't know. But either way. Zaggoth Triumph, same deal. Command Tower enters untaps, taps for any color. It's great because we have a 5-color deck. Exotic Orchard is also really good. The logic is this guy's almost always like an untapped Command Tower, Triumph, whatever. Because unless our opponents are each playing monocolored, and even if they are, that's still fine because we're a 5-color deck, so we are playing our opponent's colors. At the very worst, this card does nothing, assuming we're going against 4 or 3 colorless decks. Tarnation Vista. So I did mention that all of the elementals, the reason for Morophon is that the elementals do have multiple colors, right? However, a lot of them are monocolored. So even Morophon will reduce the cost. It's still good because we have a lot of monocolored guys, like Muldrifter's mono, Tyrant of Discord is like monocolor. Torrent Elemental, I think technically is, Endurance. So we have a lot of multicolor. We have a lot of dual color, monocolor and multicolor. So being able to tap for a bunch is good. Needle Spires. The reason I'm running these terrible cards, I run the full cycle of the Needle Spires, Oath of the Gatewatch, Battle for Zendikar, whatever, is because they turn into elementals. They enter tapped, they tap for whatever guild, and then they become an elemental. So it's fun to have sneaky blockers when someone attacks, and you're like, okay, I'll like animate this dude real quick. He's a blocker. He's a 2/1 with double strike. Or doing the same thing with like, I got a 2/3 lifelinker. Because the issue is since we're such a big mana deck, if we get board wiped, it's going to take us a little bit longer to recover, even though we have reanimation in the command zone. So these guys are good just to, we're not really attacking with them. They're really just good to deal or just block. Restless Spire. I used to have Wandering Fumarole, but this one is just better because when it attacks, you scry one. Wandering Fumarole doesn't really do much else. I didn't even put these in this order. Lumbering Falls becomes a 3/3 with hexproof. Taps for one of each. Solitude is great just because it's free, usually. It's even at worst, it's flash, enters the battlefield, exile up to a creature, and they gain that much life. The cheeky thing about Solitude is, one, if we have like Panharmonicon or any other like random doubling effect, or we have Horde of Notions, so we can be like, okay, we flash it in, we block, we just reanimate it later. It's good. Jetmir's Garden is good. We can fetch it. Creeping Tar Pit becomes unblockable until end of turn, and it's an elemental. Chandra, Awakened Inferno, straight up can't be countered. This card's brutal. Each opponent gets an emblem. At the beginning of your upkeep, this emblem deals 1 damage to you. If we lose the game, their emblem sticks around, right? So ideally, I like to play Chandra and give everyone an emblem no matter what, because we don't get it, and it puts everyone officially on a clock. It's also a tribal nuke, just deal 3 to each non-elemental. I think we have maybe 1 or 2 non-elementals in this deck, so it's really good. And then it's just deal X damage to target creature or planeswalker, and if it would be able to, it's exiled if it would die. So it's good. Uncounterable, it puts each opponent, it's uncounterable. It puts each opponent on a clock. It is a tribal nuke, or it's just a hard kill spell. Real good. Because most likely, -6, giving something 6 damage will probably kill it. Voice of Resurgence. Whenever an opponent casts a spell during your turn, and when Voice of Resurgence dies, create a dude, elemental, power and toughness equal number of creatures you control. He's good depending on the rotation we're in. So at the very worst, he's a 2-mana 2/2 blocker that when he dies, he replaces himself, which is still pretty good because we can just reanimate him later. Or if our opponent is kind of going nuts on our turn, because we have big turns. Like, since we have a lot of mana, we do big stuff in this deck. So if an opponent counters our stuff, or someone tries to interrupt, or someone like whatever, he gives us an extra guy. Villainous Wealth is definitely a card that could be cut from the deck, but I can't bring myself to do it. Sultai X. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library. You may cast any number of non-land cards from among them for free. Even if we pay 8 and X is 5, getting 5 free cards could be huge. Or it could not. Either way, the bigger we pay into X, way better the card is. Selvala Stampede is a card I love. Very near and dear. They had the signature spellbook for Gideon, Chandra, Jace. If they made one for me, Selvala Stampede's in there. Starting with you, each player votes for wild or free. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card for each wild vote, and then put this onto the battlefield. And then for each free vote, we play a permanent for free. Assuming we are in a pod of 4 with 3 opponents, I almost always say wild because we just spin until we get a random creature. Opponents typically want to say free, but it's a lose-lose situation because it's either like we're getting a free thing from our hand or a random free thing from our deck, and we're having that happen 4 times. So, I don't know, hypothetically, we Selvala Stampede. Let's say we have let's say we just have like 1 wild vote, 2 wild votes, and 2 free votes. So let's say our first wild, I'll put it off to the side. First wild, we wouldn't get Zia Torres, right? But again, it's a Tryon. So the first wild vote is we would get Nyx Bloom Ancient. It is a mana tripler. It's really, really good. We're a big mana deck. Being able to reanimate this guy over and over again is great. Just tapping one of our things for 3 mana is really good, especially since we're a big mana. It's great. So this is the random creature we spun into. Genesis Wave is kind of reverse Villainous Wealth. Pay X, reveal the top X cards of our deck, and play any number of permanents for free, which is good. We don't have a ton of instants and sorceries, which is not that bad anyways. At the very worst, we're just hitting a bunch of tap lands, which is still ran for next turn, so it's not even that bad. But either way, it's still really good. And if we flood out, even if we're just tapping this for like, I don't know, like if we have Nyx Bloom Ancient, we tap 3 lands. That's like already X is 6, which is already pretty good. We have Secluded Courtyard, enters the battlefield, say Elemental, then taps for a colorless or any color to activate elemental spells or abilities. Crib Swap is very interesting. It is a tribal instant shapeshifter. It has Changeling. Exile target creature. Its controller creates a 1/1 shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. Here's the interesting thing. We cast this, right? We get rid of a creature, and then it goes to our graveyard. And then Horde says we may play target elemental card from our graveyard. This card is an elemental because it does have Changeling. So, it's great since it has every card type. That checks in the hand. It checks everywhere. But yeah, we can play that for free. For 5 mana, we can exile a creature from our grave. Supreme Verdict, destroy all creatures, can't be countered. It's good for 4 mana because we're not doing a ton early game. We're kind of playing our rocks, we're playing our ramp and all that. So early game, it's pretty good just to have a nice clear slate. And then Maelstrom Wanderer would be our other Selvala Stampede trigger. Actually, does it say cast? Put those cards on the battlefield. Okay, so in this instance, we wouldn't get Maelstrom Wanderer's Cascade. But I mean, either way, it's a 7/5 that gives other guys haste. But not the reason. I'll put these off to the side. I think we're fine with it. You guys get it. Either way, Cascade. Play 2 cards for free. That cost 8 or less. Sorry, 7 or less. Super, super good. And again, so when we reanimate, we get the Cascade triggers because it's playing. So you can... Playing is interesting because you can play cards and you can play lands, but there's no elemental land per se. There's no like tribal land that says elemental on it, so it doesn't really matter. But play essentially says cast. So, yeah, that triggers Maelstrom. Up a Beanstalk, enters the battlefield, and whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, draw a card. So pay 2, draw a card. Pay any of our other big guys, draw an extra card. The cool thing about Up the Beanstalk is it's not worth getting rid of, in my opinion. It's like, if you want to waste your kill spell on my 2-drop that already gave me value when it entered the battlefield, great. Savai Triumph, just another Triumph. Bane of Progress it's a double-edged sword. If we have a decent amount of artifacts and enchantments, which is fine. It's really good to deal with our opponent's artifacts and enchantments. So if we need to like lose a couple of ours to destroy our like enchantment player or our artifact player's deck, it's worth it because we're going to win with creatures anyways. Roaming Throne. It's real good. Enters the battlefield, choose a creature type, elemental. It's an elemental. It's actually a golem elemental too. If a triggered ability of another creature you control would trigger, it triggers again. So in the very worst instance, Bane of Progress happens twice. In like a way better instance, Muldrifter happens twice. Tyrant of Discord happens twice. Omnath's entering ability happens twice, and then his land ability happens twice. So it's pretty good. Just doubles up all our things. AOZ would again happen twice. AOZ is good just because it's a fine way to clear out the game, I think. It's a good way to get a lot of blockers because we're a deck that relies on few big creatures to win rather than many small or medium creatures. So he's a great way to flood out. We have a decent amount of ramp in this deck, like just to the battlefield with like even Cultivate and Kodamas that can make it happen a little bit faster. But either way, no one's going to want to attack with us, attack into us, because it's either going to get chumped by a 0/1 plant or it's going to get blocked by our 5/5 guy. Unclaimed Territory, enters the battlefield, elemental. It's honestly worse Secluded Courtyard because spend this only to cast creatures of the chosen type, not activate abilities. Secluded Courtyard does both. Unclaimed Territory is only to cast the spell, which is still fine because I think it's more important getting our guys down than activating their abilities. Smoke Braider. It taps for 2 mana of any color combination, but you can only do it to cast elementals or activate their abilities. It's a super mana dark. We play this on turn 2. By turn 3, like it taps for 2, so like 4 mana, turn 3. Great. Flicker Wisp is great. Enters the battlefield, exile up another target permanent. Return that card to the battlefield at the beginning of its owner's next end step. This card's good because it can be used offensively or defensively. So we can either blink one of our opponent's like tokens and kill it. We can either blink one of their blockers and make sure it's not there anymore. Or we can blink our own stuff and it'll come back on the end step. And then again, we have like our stuff like Omnath or Tyrant of Discord or whatever is coming back in. And then if it dies, it's good because it's a good recurable way to trigger enter the battlefield abilities. If it dies, we can reanimate it with Horde. It's a 3/1 blocker with flying, so it's going to block most things. It's pretty good. It's also kind of weird. It's like an ugly moth. Elementals are weird. Cultivate. Just because I'm on the topic of art, Horde of Notions isn't this big whale thing. Horde of Notions is like all of them. Like they are like all of those guys. And even the oldest tree folk was but an acorn when Lorwyn's first mysteries were there. So yeah, Horde of Notions is like the whole forest, the whole whatever. But I always think he's just a big whale. Going into it, Cultivate, we are a 5-color deck. We are a big mana deck. We need to make sure that we have our lands on the field, and we need to make sure we have our colors on the field. So that's why we run that. Null Drifter is an Eldrazi elemental. It's 7 mana for a 4/4. When you cast it, draw 2 cards. It has Flying and Annihilator 1. We can evoke it for 3 to draw 2 cards, so it's still Null Drifter in that sense. The only thing that makes it a little bit worse is that Muldrifters can enter the battlefield, and this is a cast trigger. So if we use Horde to reanimate Null Drifter, it will trigger, but we're not really getting like any value from Panharmonicons or whatever. Chaos Warp, get rid of something we don't like. They can have something that we also probably don't like. Either way, it's an old switcheroo. Indotha Triumph is just a Triumph. Ketria Triumph is also just a Triumph. Both of those are fetchable. About a little more than halfway through. Temur Ascendancy, our creatures have haste. We want to be able to attack with them. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield, draw a card. That's most of our deck. So whenever a creature enters, it has haste and we draw. Great. Teleportation Circle is a good blink engine. It's going to re-trigger our Muldrifters. It's going to re-trigger our Tyrant of Discords. It's going to re-trigger our Omnath. It's going to re-trigger our everything. Shamil, when you have... Well, Shimil's great for Multitude. 6 is steep, but we're pretty big mana anyway, so it's okay. Spells you control can't be countered. We don't want to pay like 7 mana for an elemental and then have it be countered. That's not cool, so that's already good. And then at the beginning of our end step, discover 5, which is basically just Cascade 5, but better. So it's discover 5, exile cards until you get a 5 drop or less, and then either you play it for free or you put it into your hand. So it already gives value because 6 is a steep price, but it does offer immediate value. And if it sticks around, that's every turn. Ralgrin Triumph, still just another Triumph. Lava Claw reaches, becomes a 2/2 with fire breathing. Rhythm of the Wild, our creatures can't be countered, and our non-tokens enter the battlefield. They have Riot, so they enter with a counter or they enter with haste. Playing Horde with this is cool because he's uncounterable, and he already has haste, so he's just a 6/6 attacker with Vigilance and Trample. Love it. Chromatic Lantern fixes our colors. Pretty much it. It's a mana rock, fixes our colors. Shriek Maw enters the battlefield, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. It's good. It's basically a proto-Solitude almost. It's probably a worse Solitude. It's definitely a worse Solitude. But, I mean, either way, we have it enter. It'll kill something. We can reanimate it. It'll kill something else. It's good. Beast Within pops something we don't like. They can have a 3/3 instead. I can assure you that 3/3 is no big deal. Incandescent Soulstoke, Elemental Lord, and then we can pay 2, tap it. You may put an elemental card from our hand onto the battlefield. An elemental creature card from our hand on the battlefield, and then it gains haste until end of turn, but then we sack it at the end step. So it's good to play offensively and defensively because here's how I'm thinking about it, right? I'm always thinking of Tyrant of Discord just because he's such a good card to use for an example, right? So I'm just going to keep him off to the side, honestly, because I like him so much. So we can either pay 2 mana, cheese one of our big guys in, or even like Avengers End card just because it's on top. Cheese one of them in, get the big end of the battlefield ability happen, and then get rid of it, no big deal. Or we can play it offensively, play this, have our opponent sack a bunch of stuff, crash in with the 7/7, goes to the grave, reanimate it with Horde later. It would be an 8/8 because +1/+1. Or someone attacks us, we say, okay, we're not going to block with our 2/2. We'll tap it, bring in a 7/7, or tap it and bring an Avengers Zendikar, make a bunch of dudes, sacrifice it anyways. It's good early game. It's good late game. It's just good overall. Rafine's Tower, just another, Triumph. Great Henge. It never costs 9, which is great. It usually costs like 4 or less. Like even if you have it's just going to be less and less. Taps for 2, gain 2 life. Whenever a non-token enters, draw a card and put a counter on it. Super good. It says taps for mana, gains us life, draws us cards, makes our guys bigger. What's to not like about the Great Henge? Merciless Eviction is a card that by now should have been replaced by Farewell. I just don't have a Farewell. But it's fine. Again, I put this in the deck in 2017. So choose one, exile all creatures, artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers. Never seen it done on planeswalkers before, but it's usually just exile all creatures, get them out of there, clean up the board. Celestial Colonnade, probably arguably the best man land, becomes a 4/4 with flying and vigilance. It is 5 mana, which is steep, but the nice thing about it, since it has vigilance, it doesn't tap when you attack with it, so you still get to keep that mana, kind of. Flamekin Harbinger, super good card. Enters the battlefield, search your deck for an elemental, reveal it, put it on top. So early game, we'd probably just want to put Smoke Braider on top because it's our easiest mana dork. Late game, when we have it, we just put whatever makes sense. Usually late game, I like to put Maelstrom Wanderer on top just because I like getting that 2-for-1. And he's also nice because he's just a 1/1 for 1. So it's like, okay, we play it, we tutor up. You want to attack us? Cool, we'll block it, reanimate it later, tutor it up again. Cool. Risk Card's Expertise. Again, it's a card that probably could be cut. It was my pre-release promo back in the day. Some of them you do see the pre-release promos, like Omnath. I just bought a pre-release pack later. But nonetheless, I like the old promo. I don't know why they got rid of the date stamp, whatever. But I was there January 14th, 2017. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Even on Horde, at worst, 6 mana, draw 5, play a card that costs 5 or less for free. Sounds good to me. It's just drawing a lot. Primal Beyond enters the battlefield tapped unless you reveal an elemental. It taps for a colorless, or it taps for any color, but only to cast elementals and play elemental abilities. So, real good. Also, if you can see in that art, I like that little dude. He's like a little stick figure. City of Brass, we're a 5-color deck. Taps for any color. We can take a damage. That's no big deal. Astral Cornucopia is a new card I added to the deck, and I really like it. It's not that great, but I really like it because it adds up after a while. If I play this, it's the first time you cast a spell on your turn, you may gain 1 life for each of that spell's colors. And it's only once each turn, and it taps for anything. It's nice when I play Horde and I gain 5 life. Gaining 5 life is pretty good in Commander. I'm sure there are better mana rocks, but I do like just like the casual life gain. It adds up after a while. Like when you're playing like Omnats, or you're playing like even just gaining 2 life for casting a spell or a creature is good. It's like that's still good. Leyline Binding, we have so many triumphs. This card usually just costs 1. It's just exile target non-land until it leaves the battlefield, typically for 1 mana, and it has flash. Storing Wildwood is a very sneaky blocker because it's a 3/4 with reach, and no one knows it's a 3/4 with reach. So that's kind of like the meta trick, is you have to be open about what you have, but if someone's like, do you have like any blockers? It's like, currently I do not have any blockers. And they say, I attack you. And you say, I actually have a 3/4. I didn't at the time. You have to be honest with your cards, but you can do a little bit of wordplay, a little bit of shenanigans. Path of Ancestry, enters battlefield tapped. Tap it for any one of our colors of our commander. He's 5 color, so every color. And then whenever you cast a creature that shares the type using this mana, scry 1. That's really good, just because it's easy. It's just a nice quality of life card advantage of just, you play this early game, tap it, I'll see what's on top when I cast a spell or a creature, see what's going on. Risen Reef, probably the best elemental ever. When it or another elemental enters the battlefield, look at the top card of your library. If it is a land card, put it on the battlefield tapped. If not, put it into your hand. Literally, whenever he or another elemental enters the battlefield, if the top card of your deck is a land, put it into play tapped. If it's not, quote unquote, draw it. Huge. Felwar Stone, short, sweet, to the point. Same logic as Evolving Wilds. Someone's playing at least some of our colors, so it's just too many. Easy mana rock. Nature's Ore, search our deck for a Triumph, put it in the battlefield tapped. Or, if we want, we can just search our deck for a basic forest, have that under untapped. Either way. Biza, the Boundless Spring, is a brand new card, and I've actually not yet to play with it, so I don't know if it's good or not. But when it enters, create a treasure if an opponent has more lands than you, 4 life if an opponent has more life, 2 fish if an opponent has more creatures, and draw a card if an opponent has more cards in hand. Assuming, if we're drastically in the lead, it doesn't matter because we're already in the lead. But if we're not in the lead, this is going to catch us up. Again, we have the Blink stuff, we have the Panharmonicon, which I keep saying, but we'll see in a second. It's great. We can reanimate it for more value. It just does a little bit of everything. Cavern of Souls, elemental. We don't want our elementals being countered. Sounds good to me. Guardian Project, so whenever a creature enters the battlefield, it gets commander. So creature enters the battlefield, draw a card. It's good. Aether Snipe is a cheeky little dude. Enters the battlefield, return target non-land card to its owner's hand, and then it just has Evoke for some reason. All the elementals have, a lot of them have Evoke, but it's just like a 6-mana 4/4. It's just like an old Magic card that's still really good. Because again, we can evoke them out, no big deal. We can then reanimate them, bounce something else. It's good. Genesis Ultimatum. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. Put any number of permanent cards from among them onto the battlefield and the rest in your hand. 7 mana. Basically play 5 cards for free. Sounds pretty good. Fury is Fury. Double Strike, you can evoke it from your hand by getting rid of a red card. 3/3 Double Strike. When it enters the battlefield, deals 4 damage divided among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers. So we can use it to, on our turn, to kill creatures. If we just exile a red card from our hand, no big deal. We can use it defensively by reanimating it from our grave with Horde and just having a 3/3 double striking guy as a blocker that then will deal 4 damage to stuff. Pretty good too. Raging Ravine, it's just a 3/3, and when it attacks, you put a 1/1 counter on it. That's fine, it gets bigger and bigger. Mirari's Wake, we need a lot of mana. 5 mana, mana doubler, and Arts of Lord. Sounds good to me. Hissing Quagmire gets Death Touch. We're not, honestly, guys, we're not on the make these guys 2/2 or like make these guys elementals and block with them. It's just an option, and it's on theme for the deck anyways, so I like it. But honestly, Hissing Quagmire having Death Touch is going to be the best blocker. Just killing it. Urza's Stinkubator. Say elementals. Elementals cost 2 less. At the very worst, it is free commander attacks. At the very best, it's making our Muldrifter evoke for a single blue. Good for me. Muldrotha, the Gravetide. It's nice because we won't have to, like, Horde is good when we're spending 5 mana to cast, like, a Maelstrom Wanderer from the grave that costs 8 mana. But sometimes it's like, hey, I don't really need to cast, like, Flamekin Harbinger, like the 1 mana dude for 5 mana. So it's nice to be able to just get rid of anything that was milled, killed, whatever. Back nice and easy. 3 visits, search your deck for a Triome, basic forest, it's nature's lore. Omnath, Locust of Rage, landfall. When a land enters, make a 5/5, which is already pretty crazy. Whenever it or another elemental you control dies, bolt something. That's huge. That is so good. It's good because if we do a big attack into someone, if they kill any of our creatures, they basically have a flicked 3 almost, which is really cool for our smaller guys. And our bigger guys, it's just like good value. It's good. Arcane Signet, it's Arcane Signet. Or a 5-color deck, 2 mana. Kodama's Reach is the same thing as Cultivate, except you can splice it onto Arcane. We don't have any Arcane cards. Sorry, no, we can't splice it onto Arcane. Arcane cards can be spliced onto it. I'm sorry. But again, search our deck for 2 basics, 1 to the field, 1 to our hand. It's ramp. We're not missing a land drop next turn. It's good. Soul Ring is Soul Ring. Run Soul Ring. A little speck on the card. Reflecting Pool. We're a 5-color deck. If we just have this in like Command Tower, we're golden. Worst case, it's a Triome, but very rare. It's hard to pick up a hand without any 2-color or 3-color, 5-color lands. Like it's difficult in this deck, so it taps for anything. Soul of the Harvest is a little bit of an outdated card in my opinion, but it's still good. It's a 6/6 for 6 with trample, and when another creature, non-token creature, enters the battlefield under our control, draw a card. So it's good. It's like a good threat, but I mean, like with new Magic standards, it could be better. We have what's the other card? Yark and Panharmonicon. I do remember I did put these next to each other because they have a signature on them, but I'll talk about that in a second. They basically do the same exact thing. Panharmonicon, if an artifact or creature enters the battlefield, and it would cause a triggered ability to trigger, do it an additional time. Yark is a 3/5 with Death Touch and Lifelink. If a permanent entering the battlefield would cause a trigger ability of a permanent you control to trigger, do it an additional time. These are our little doubler guys for like whenever things enter, blink. It's good. They are signed by Saffron Olive of MTG Goldfish. Met him at a Magic Con about a year ago. It was super fun. He's a super cool dude. Check out MTG Goldfish's channel. I'm not sponsored or anything. I just help appreciate other Magic people. Thank you guys for watching. Horde of Notions. 5-color elemental. Tell me what you think of the deck down below. Things you would have in it. Things you would improve to it. And that's all I got. Thank you guys for watching. And I'll see you next time.